How important has you both building up your brand on Twitter, but also your newsletter, been to your success?
Social media is, like you say, it's a funnel. You want to write what you want to attract. So if you find something interesting, write about it.
In today's episode of Lock In or Log Off, we're excited to welcome an insightful guest. He's one of the leading decentralized AI researchers. With over 6,000 subscribers on Substack, he's been making waves by sharing his findings. As the co-host of the Modern Market Show, a researcher for Mocha Network, and with his work with decentralized AI research, he's at the forefront of exploring new ideas in the evolving Web3 space. Introducing Sammy.
What is decentralized AI?
The whole boom in 2022 with ChatGPT is a consumer-facing tool that I think for the first time the end user could effectively see the power of AI by literally interacting with it. That's the AI boom, but it's literally been quiet for about 2 or 3 years until recently, and that is literally plugging it into blockchain, so crypto. So giving it crypto rails, and I think that is an element of owning a piece of the internet. So that would be what I would class as decentralized AI.
Welcome back to the Lock In or Log Off podcast, where I speak to builders, creators, and traders to understand how they spotted the opportunity and how they navigated their way to success. Today, I'm joined by Sammy. How's it going, man?
It's good, man. How are you?
Yeah, all good, all good. I like to kick this off with understanding very much how Web3 has changed people's journeys in life specifically. So I'd love to understand, who was Sammy before Web3 and who are you now?
Who was Sammy before Web3? I'm from TradFi, so traditional finance. Worked for Ernst & Young, which is a big four accounting firm. Qualified as an accountant, so kind of went down that whole route. It was okay, I've got a career. That's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I kind of went to Australia first, so was in the UK to start with, moved to Australia with them. Effectively realized that I kind of want to try something a bit different to audit, which is where I started. Moved into consulting and stumbled into blockchain consulting. And it's okay, well, this is the rabbit hole. This would have been about 2020. The pandemic had hit, it was kind of divulging into a bit of a mess from that. We couldn't go outside in Melbourne. It was locked down. So just went down that rabbit hole and kept digging and just eventually ended up here. So left EY probably, I think it was 2021, maybe November time. Went full-time Web3, incorporated my own business, and then I've just been doing consulting, contracting ever since. So.
And how's your life now in Web3 different to what it was like before when you were at Ernst & Young?
A lot less structure, a lot more fluidity, probably higher risk, just from obviously crypto side, but also just in terms of job security, because you kind of, as an independent consultant or contractor or whatever, you don't have that job security. Whereas EY is very structured, you have a certain trajectory within there, you hit those goals, you have those appraisals, and you progress up the firm. I'm probably someone who suits that independent consultant, less structured environment. So I think for me personally, it's higher risk, but far more rewarding. You effectively take home the efforts that you put in, which is it's just insane value. So, yeah.
So I assume that is part of what made you want to make the leap, because that obviously you had a very successful career in Web2, and that's what a lot of people kind of are very ambitious for, to kind of work for a company like Ernst & Young. What made you make that leap into going down your own route?
So I think, the first kind of mini bull in 2021 would have been around about that May time. I think it kind of blew off then. But then it kind of fell off a cliff after that Saturday Night Live with Elon Musk. But then NFT started to resurge, and I was well, this is you can actually buy stuff with this crypto now. You can put that into something that's artwork, digital artwork, or whether it's, and I think Damien Hirst was probably the first NFT that I tried to acquire when that minted. A British artist. I was this is a no-brainer. So me and my housemate actually both went into that raffle. He got it, I didn't.
Oh no.
That then ran up to 11 ETH, and I was people are paying ETH was 4K at that point.
Yeah.
People are willing to pay 45 grand, 44 grand for this piece of digital work. This is crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, went down that rabbit hole, and I was well, this is obviously somewhere that I want to be. It's just insane. You're kind of cutting edge. You can own a piece of the internet, and I think that's an incredibly strong value proposition. And I'm sure we'll get into it later with AI and the crypto rails there. But I think that that to me is it was a eureka moment. I can work independently on the cutting edge of technology without having to basically without having to have a boss.
That is a beautiful side of working for yourself. And
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, just participating in Web3, working Web3 is a world in its own compared to that of Web2. I also come from more of a traditional background in marketing. And yeah, just the freedom and fluidity, the innovation, the opportunity, it's all at like you say, it's all highly volatile. Like it's very much at like if you enjoy the risk and you enjoy the cutting edge side of technology, it's great, but it does come with its volatility. I think we all experienced that during the last 2 years or 2.5 years up until the last few months. But something outside of just your consultancy is also the brand that you've built for yourself, from writing specifically, both your newsletter, but also just across Twitter. And I mean, you have some incredible posts that have gone incredibly viral, and you seem to hit that stride very frequently. What does it take to be so good at writing, especially on Twitter and Web3s?
It's funny you say that though, because I was a terrible writer to begin with. Like I remember I used to get, so EY, like you had to produce like board reports and stuff like that. So you kind of learn from your peers, and everyone there is, I mean, they're very smart. So you're kind of striving to achieve what they're trying to achieve. And I learned a lot in that process. And I don't think without that training, I would be like who I am today. So I respect it for that. But I think that taking what I learned there and like learning how to write like in a concise way where people can use that information and it's useful, that's something that I've taken away and kind of learned to do that. But like you say, like writing on social media is very different to like writing reports. And it's like, I'm kind of like a research analyst at heart, but I think what I did was decided to like, I made a bit of money, round tripped it, but had enough money to keep me going. And I think like having that 3 months of runway, I always like to use as 3 months. Like if I don't make it in 3 months, then I have to go back to a traditional job. And that enough to me was like a catalyst or a kick up the bum to be like, I need to make it. So I think being independent and writing what you're passionate about, you're willing to research deeper than the next person, find like nuances that other people probably won't see. And you can actually provide that value in abundance to people that want to read your stuff. So like, and I know you had B-Check on recently, he did a newsletter. He actually got me into writing a newsletter. So back in 2022, I met him, decided to start this newsletter, had no idea where it was going to go. And like now it's just over a year later, I think it's at sort of 4,500 subscribers. And like, it's still relatively small in like newsletter terms, but like, it's just wild to think that there's 4,000 people that want to read my stuff. It's just like, it's just crazy. But I think like, yeah, the biggest thing is just providing that value. And like, if you just keep providing the value, don't like token gate it or put like a payment on it. I think it comes back in different ways.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'd love to dive a bit more into that specifically, because something out of all the people I've spoken to recently on the show and just in general catch-ups is content is such a great funnel for providing opportunities everywhere else, whether it's investment opportunities, whether it's business opportunities, everything like that. How important has you both building up your brand on Twitter, but also your newsletter, been to your success as a consultant and a researcher and working with different brands, etc.?
Well, I think like what you put out on social media is like you say, it's a funnel. So you want to write what you want to attract. So if you find something interesting, write about it, because I think that will then like you'll be able to provide value and insights into something that like people at that business might be like, okay, well, this is actually really interesting. We hadn't thought of that perspective. Like that's interesting, like an interesting perspective. And I've done it with like, I found the whole poly market, prediction market, decentralized prediction market. It's really interesting. So I started writing about that, and that got a lot of traction. I've written about like features like MetaMask and like their sell feature, all this kind of stuff that is quite nuanced, but like I found it interesting and I wanted to write about it, and I couldn't find the information on social media. So I was like, okay, well, why don't I just research it and then provide that value by creating that opportunity for someone to search it rather than them having to write about it. And that seems to have like done pretty well recently, like AI agents, obviously more recently. But I think that if there's not something out there, like it takes time and effort to then go and find it. But if you collate it, like you've done the work, why don't you just write about it and make someone else's life easier?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like it's funny. I feel like a lot of the people that end up doing really well, even from like a business and content side, is like having a struggle and then finding the solution for it. So like you, when look in this case, it's like looking for resources from a content perspective and understanding different things, and it's like really hard and there's friction there, and a lot of people would just be like, stop doing that. And I mean, there's a lot of opportunity on the other side of friction. I think everyone realizes in Web3 now is like the best investments are the things that you have to kind of bridge and go to these other tends to have the highest upside. But even with the content side, I think that's really interesting in terms of finding the opportunity by it not it's being something that you wanted but couldn't find, because they're like within the space there's bound to be at least a few people that are looking for that same information and probably won't want to put in the effort. So if you can make that a lot easier for them, that's a kind of great growth hack in itself. But on something you mentioned a little bit ago in terms of the 3 month rule, in terms of when you left your job and having a 3 month rule. And I had a very similar thing when I left mine. I was like, I'm going to leave with a certain amount of runway, and if I make it happen, I'll make it happen. If not, I'll go back.
Yeah.
What does the 3 month rule look like? And for someone who maybe wants to take the risk of leaving their traditional job and going to explore any opportunity in any industry, they just want to kind of explore their passion. What is advice you'd give them to kind of prepare themselves in I guess, a logical way to take that risk?
Well, I think the runway is super important. Like, you've got to have gas money for life. Like, you need to be able to afford to pay your rent, pay your bills. So work out how much you need for that. Give yourself that window. Like, once you've got that money saved and you can support yourself independently for that period of time, I think that gives you an opportunity. It's just an opportunity, because then it's up to you to put in the hard yards to then like research or do whatever passion it might be. But at least you put that goal on yourself. And like, if for instance you're able to earn a little bit of money, that might give you that little bit of extra time. So like, I would do the odd piece of contracting. So I work for various brands in the space behind the scenes, and they pay me XYZ for analyst reports, like go-to-market strategy reports. So like the social media stuff is one thing, but there's the consulting side behind the scenes that I do as well. And that gives me runway to then continue doing what I love doing. And that's like learning about all this like cutting edge technology and just sort of like being in the mixer of it. I think that's a huge opportunity. But yeah, runway is probably the biggest thing. But I think also just having that reminder that when you're working in those traditional jobs, like, this has so much, like, you have so much freedom to do whatever you want independently.
Yeah.
And I don't take that for granted. Whereas I think if I came out of uni straight into this, I wouldn't know what I was missing. So I think that for me, like, knowing that I just don't want to go back to that very structured, hierarchical like organization, that gives me enough incentive to be like, okay, well, maybe I have 3 months, but if I don't, I have to go back to that. So I better work my ass off.
Yeah, it's interesting putting the pressure on yourself of like having so much up for stake because you get exposed to a lifestyle that you realize this is really what I love. Really does make you so much more motivated to like never have to kind of go back and kind of make sure you try everything you possibly can to make it a success of which you have. So kudos to you. And I think there's a lot of people that's maybe too scared to, but I think I would really push them, depending on your situation. Obviously, it'll kind of vary how much you have to plan ahead. But if you're quite young, I think it's definitely good to be logical and kind of have that runway specifically. Yeah. But I could not emphasize it more to take the risk and give it a go.
Well, this is the thing. Like, there's something there that a point you made around, like your age or like the responsibilities you have. Like, that's super important. Like, if I was 10 years from now, if I have a young family, there's obviously different priorities. Like, you can't take the same risks that you can in your 20s. But the biggest thing that in my hindsight is probably in your 20s, you need to take those risks. It's actually negligent not to take those risks because you will regret it later on. And actually, if you have the basic support, if you're able to like maybe fund yourself for 3-6 months, you can rent, you can do whatever. But a lot of the time you're able to then bounce back. Whereas if you're later on in life, like, you're less employable, like you might have skill set, but I don't know, like, I think there's certain aspects that then become harder because you're not able to then take the risks. There's probably more stresses outside of like your work life, like whether it's family or whatever, that you have to prioritize. So you're not able to give those opportunities as much of a go.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something I've been lucky with to do at an age where like there's like if everything went badly, it's actually not that bad. Like I don't
Yeah.
I have no major responsibilities. Worst case, like maybe I'll move back to my parents, anything like this. Like there's like the worst case actually isn't that bad, but the potential upside is huge. And I think it is I feel like yeah, I feel like a lot of people don't pursue it because of the potential discomforts that it
Mm.
comes with it. Because like when I first left my Web 2 role, I had to scale back massively. For like 6 months, I was not going away as much. I was not like going out with my friends as much. I was like, it was very much bare bone. Like it was just like work and or like try do a certain amount of work, try figure out how I'm gonna navigate this journey, everything like that. And there was probably like a 3 month phase where there was like it really felt like nothing was gaining traction. But then it did, and then like the potential upside after that has been amazing, and it's been the best decision I probably ever made. But I think it is understanding that you have to sacrifice in order to at least pursue that, and then if it pays off, you probably will reap the rewards in many ways.
But also I mean the friction is good. Like the discomfort means that you're out of your comfort zone, so you're actually
Yeah.
pushing your own abilities. But there was something else I was going to say. I can't remember. Yeah, it's gone now.
How do you feel about how much do you enjoy putting yourself in your outside of your comfort zone specifically? Like, do you tend to be a person that enjoys pushing yourself into these new areas, considering
I
you
think I think
live in
it
yeah
I think it depends. Like I think from an intellectual standpoint, I'm always like pretty curious. So with this AI stuff, like that intersect, like it's just a completely new field, and because there is like such a steep learning curve, um, I feel like I can go deeper into it and just research at a different level from like the average person. So, and that I guess that's a strength of mine, but it's also to my detriment as well. Like I go into these like rabbit holes and it might be a couple of days and I come out and I'm like, well, I've neglected my health. Like, I've neglected these other things. Like my partner's like, where have you been? Like, what are you doing? Like this kind of stuff. So I think the balance for me is sometimes difficult, but the discomfort, I mean, sometimes it is sacrifices. Like you might miss opportunities. You have this term like lock in,
yeah
and that's for a reason. Like there are opportunities that would disappear. And even coming here today, like I had messages like saying XYZ on whatever opportunity it might be. And I'm like, shit, I don't have my laptop with me. I can't, I feel like I'm missing out.
yeah
But sometimes you do have to be like, okay, well, I've got other things in my life that I need to prioritize as well. Otherwise, like your health is going to suffer, your relationships are going to suffer. But there are periods of time where as long as you communicate that to whoever it is, like whether it's your partner or whatever, and if they respect that, that's great. And it's like, well, you have that opportunity, but you need to knuckle down in that window.
yeah
And you set those boundaries. But I think discomfort is good.
yeah
It just depends on like how far you want to push it, and there probably is sacrifices at some point that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, and on the topic of you go into there like about kind of neglecting your health in times when you kind of really deep dive into it, and as the bear market or the bull market only gets crazier now, I think it's going to be harder to probably find that balance specifically. But in terms of your time in Web3 and just from a personal and like a professional standpoint, what is I guess some of the toughest things you've had to overcome and kind of work through yeah within the industry?
So I think the biggest thing, and this is probably, so I headed up the research team at Origins Analytics for, I think maybe a year or 18 months as like a contract role. So I had a certain level of job security when I was there, but that finished. So that was acquired by Treehouse, which is like another firm. And as a result, like as of June 30th, like pretty much got like, sorry guys, there's no more job for you. So I think from then on, I was like, okay, well, I literally have like I don't have any income, so I need to either find a job or I need to double down on myself. And I think that uncertainty was probably the biggest bit of discomfort and concern. What was your question specifically?
How have you like yeah, I guess what has been the biggest challenge you've had from a personal
Yeah.
perspective in Web3?
Yeah, so I think that's a pretty big challenge because it becomes like a fork in the road. It's like, well, I either cop out and go back to my traditional job, like corporate job, which is comfortable, like you can earn a decent salary as a qualified accountant, but like it might not be as stimulating. And it's like, well, I either persevere, give it a good shot, and actually try and make some money to survive. But it's so volatile, so risky, or I can just like settle. And I think that fork in the road for me was pretty hard, and that probably came back in July, August last year. Luckily, I found some work with so NFT Now, like Now Media, so I did some contract work for them behind the scenes, and then some other opportunities came once I started writing about various things in crypto that I found interesting, like brands gravitate towards you.
Yeah.
I found like outbound DMs were terrible. Like just don't even bother. Don't just double down on your own time, like creating content that engages with these brands, and then they'll come to you. And I think that is far easier to then strike a relationship with that particular person because they know your content, and you're in the driving seat as well because you can then negotiate whatever you want in terms of like helping them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. I think a lot of the biggest businesses I've seen grow from like people who have started agencies and everything like that. Everyone I've spoken to has said like the biggest thing is like building a brand for themselves and making content that will be consumed by those, like by your target audience of like the brands you want to work with or the people you want to work with and everything like that. It's like, it's the best form of BD is like the content and the brand you build for yourself, and that can lead to all these consultant roles and everything like that. So I think kind of doubling down on the content is a huge thing, but I'm glad that you kind of doubled down on the higher risk side of things, because it seems to have paid off, and it seems you've been able to enjoy the life that you rarely enjoy.
But I also think there's a certain element of like imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So like no matter, and maybe it's like a complex where it's like no matter how like successful you get or like how you think you've achieved, like there's always a risk of comparing yourself to the next person in Web3 who's like overperforming, like, or like it's just excelling in a specific area, and you feel like, okay, well, I'm not that good. But then I think sometimes I just think I need to pause and reflect and be like, well, this is where I was last year. This is where I am now. And actually you should only really measure yourself against your own goals. And I think that's super important. And that's something that I've started to learn because there are people in the space that just accelerate within their niche and they're like just unbelievable, but you're not going to perform that same way in that particular niche because it's not your USP. It's not like your strong value proposition that would benefit you in a similar way. Like there's going to be something else that you eventually discover.
Yeah.
And that's why I think like it's so important to try so many different things and explore different areas within crypto as well, because eventually you'll find something that you resonate with, and actually you'll be able to go far harder than the next person because you just enjoy it and it becomes a pastime. So when someone clocks off at 5 p.m, you're still going, or like on the weekend, if you've got some free time, you'll be doing that.
Yeah, I think on the imposter syndrome side of things, I think a lot of people in Web3 probably struggle with it because I feel like it can be an industry where there can be moments where you can have such fast-tracked success in some ways and such huge wins that you can sometimes like think it's too good to be true, and kind of the positions you're getting in are too good to be true. And especially considering age is just doesn't matter in the space. Like we see people at any point of life kind of succeeding within the space. And I think, at least for me, I've definitely had times where I've really struggled with the imposter syndrome side of things, and it's something that I still working through. But I think you made a good point there in terms of just reflecting, like when you first came to the space, what were your goals, and like looking at that as be like, oh, okay, well I achieved those, and it's like you kind of when you look back at what you first set yourself out to do, you kind of can put into perspective of like you're doing really well considering what you came in to do, and then you just continue to grow off the back of those.
And I think just your point around setting goals, something that I realized, I think it was last week, like I found an old notepad where I'd written my goals for 2025, and I literally went through them and I was like, I've literally ticked off all of my goals. They weren't that ambitious, but like I was just like, I just need something. Completely forgotten that I'd done it. And even just like metrics around like the number of followers on Twitter and stuff like that. Like I literally hit 25K today. And that was literally just a goal on my thing. And I was just like, this is great. Like I'm just ticking it off. But I think to that point, like it's just important to set those goals. And maybe from my own reflection, maybe it wasn't stretch enough because I achieved them. And maybe that's that imposter syndrome coming back in. It's like, are you doing well enough? But yeah.
Well, no, I think congrats on the 25K. But I think that's going to be a good feeling. I think you should definitely celebrate things like that. I think that's another thing is like in Web3, it moves so fast. You can get all these wins, but then you're constantly looking at the next one. And I think it can be really hard to like pause and be like, okay, let me just like enjoy what I've managed to achieve, whether it's financially, whether it's career-wise, whether it's followers, any of these small wins that matter to you. I think more people need to take the time out to really reflect and kind of be happy with it.
And I think there is a danger though with Web3 that it doesn't feel real sometimes. Like you see all these like snapshots of your Phantom wallet or whatever, and a lot of the time it looks like Monopoly money. Like you have all these different currencies, and sometimes I step back and think, like I then look at my bank account, I'm like,
something ain't right.
I need to take some of that out. But like, because I think that is something that I'm finding ever more important. It's like, well, I don't own a property, but I would like to own a property at some point. So I need to be able to funnel that out of crypto and into like tangible assets that make a change in your life. And it comes back to that point, like life-changing money. Like you have these ambitions, but I think people just keep changing those goals. And there is that danger that you kind of, you round trip it. And I did that last cycle, like big time. I bought these like NFTs that were like orcs. And like, you have like a decent wedge of your portfolio in these NFTs that are liquid assets.
Yeah.
Of course, they're going to go to zero when the bull market finishes. So I think like, yeah, it's just interesting to have that perspective and check yourself and maybe take profits. And the things that you learn the hard way last cycle, I'm trying not to make those same mistakes, but it's so easy to get carried away with everyone else. Like, oh, everything's going to like whatever.
Yeah.
XYZ.
It's like twofold, I feel like. It's the whole thing of like getting over those struggles of like, I've got PTSD from the like round tripping last cycle.
Yeah.
And also the PTSD of the bear market where you're like, it's going to pull back, or like, I don't want to invest. Like that whole thing of like, it is like such a mental game investing in Web3, especially once you like made mistakes from the last cycle, went through the bear market. There's a lot of like mental barriers you have to like flush out and kind of really embrace the opportunity that we're currently seeing.
But I think it's also like looking at your time frames. Like I intend to be in the space for like probably the rest of my life. So I don't need to make it this cycle, if you know what I mean. It's like, well, I want to participate. And even if I did make money, like I would still want to participate in the same things that I'm doing anyway. So I feel like I'm in the right place irrespective. Yes, it's nice to take your chips off the table and change your life, your physical life, rather than just this digital life that we've become accustomed to. But yeah, I just find that as long as I'm mentally stimulated and I'm able to change like my life and my family's life in person, like that is the ultimate goal. And I think once you hit a certain level, like I look at a lot of the people who do have wealth on the timeline, they're always striving for something more.
Yeah.
And it's good to have ambitions, but I think you also need to just check in and see, okay, well, am I happy?
Yeah.
And if you're not, like make changes. But yeah, just that reflection is so important to me.
Yeah, I think self-awareness is really important. And something I've like set myself like clear things for like the cycle. Like if there's single trades that get to certain like numbers, I get out, because I've now decided to, I think the best frame that's helped me is like putting it comparatively to how it could impact my parents or like my really close family's life. Is like this one trade, like there's been NFTs that I've had run up to like 10K or like 15K. I'm like, that could do so much for the people around me. It's like, why should I should be like, in that cases, I should just be either like putting into like, in some ways taking some chips off the table and changing the people around me lives, or like at least building in a more, I guess, less risk way with some of that liquidity. And I think it's really important as we go into this bull market, is like understanding and like really putting into perspective, because it's so easy to like, when you're always in Web3, you're looking at all these crazy numbers all the time. But when you take it out, you're like, okay, like that could be like this, like that could lead to like a house deposit, or that could lead to like a new car. And I think Shiv done a really nice thing, is he bought both of his parents a car. And I think I would like to see more people look to, although you want to stay and kind of continue to grow your bags, at some point, I think it is logical to be like, look, we're a certain stage into this bull market. Let me start taking some chips off the table. But on that topic of taking chips off the table, what is your strategy for this bull market in terms of taking some liquidity into stables, or kind of exiting a little bit of the higher risk assets?
So I think like our perspective is warped to an extent on like certain assets. And I think that we have this idea that we've got to take it out into stables, but I think you should have like a target. And it comes down to that runway thesis as well, where I think that you need to work out how much money will change your life. And then that is your target to take off the table by the end of this bull run. Anything else, like I'd rotate into, like if you're here for a multi-cycle and if you believe in the whole crypto thesis and like Bitcoin is like a solid store of value, I think taking profits into that makes sense. Like there will be a drawdown. I'm sure there'll be some black swan event that we don't see coming. So obviously you don't want to be fully exposed to like the high end of the risk curve when that happens. But I think for me, coming from like a traditional finance perspective, I've got that broad understanding of like risk management. My risk management at the moment, I have some like traditional finance stuff, like bonds. Like I don't really do equities because I just don't have the knowledge. Like I feel like if I'm going to do that, I might as well do crypto because I'm in that space. But then like I'll have like the two ends of the risk spectrum. So like traditional bonds and things, which are pretty low risk, like risk free or whatever. But then on the other side, you've got crypto. So it's like my portfolio is relatively balanced, but I'm in my early or mid 30s now. So I've got that time frame to then make it back if I need to. And actually, over time, you can weather that volatility if you've got those long time horizons. Like hence why you look at pension funds when they manage like people's like investments. Like the younger you are, you tend to be on like a more equity based, like on stocks rather than bonds. But as you get closer to maturity or retirement, you're kind of more heavily weighted in bonds because you need to then eventually take that out. So if for instance you retire and the stock market's crash and you've like heavily weighted in equities, it's just not going to serve you well for taking your pension. So I think like just understanding that time frame, and I think for me, I'm aware of the risks and I know I can take in like certain
I think it's important to manage your like risk portfolio. I am probably not the right person saying this. I am like 90% in crypto and like 10% elsewhere. But
but
yeah.
I think you're younger though, right? So
Yeah.
like, and also if you're in the industry a lot of the time, you probably have like a competitive advantage there than you would like in equities, or like unless you've got like a passion for a certain business that
Yeah.
you're going to read up on all the time, stay abreast of it, but you're not going to generate the returns that you are in crypto. And within crypto, there is this pretty good risk curve now where the majors, I mean, yes, they're volatile and they'll do like a couple of multiples or they'll draw down 50%, but I think we've become accustomed to that and we're willing to accept that volatility.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. That's the reason. Well, one, because like I think I can take the risk at the age I'm at, but also two, because like the money that I put into like stocks and everything like that just would like I can do so much better with it, at least at the moment within the crypto industry. So like I kind of see it as like even if draws back like 50%, so like the opportunity to get multiples before then are like much higher. So yeah, that's kind of where I see my kind of risk at the moment. But I do like I say, like as I see how it could change people's lives, I am looking to kind of take more chips off the table as the bull goes and certain wins come through. But in terms of we see retail coming in. We've seen like at least recently with the meme coins, TikTok a community is getting into meme coins, and some people will strike gold. Some people will make insane amounts of money, and more retail will come in, and I'm sure more people will kind of make some substantial money, similar to how we made it, but we round tripped. What is one tip you'd give for the retail that are coming in this cycle, to kind of avoid any mistakes you made last cycle?
Well, I think security is the biggest thing. Like, there's so many people I see in, like, even my friends, they'll come in, they'll start clicking links. I'm just like, just don't click links. Because I think that's the biggest thing. Like, you can make a lot of money, but you can lose it in an instance with like a wallet drainer or something like that. So I think like the first thing you should do is learn about security and like how things work and play with like small amounts of money, because I'm sure like you will lose it, whether it's through like the price action or whether it's through like getting rugged. Whether it's through like a project being like, now we're just not going to stop, we're not going to continue development, or whether it's through like a scammer like getting you through social engineering or whatever. But I think that's probably the biggest thing for new people coming in, because the moment that you are stung by that, that sticks with you and you literally like, nah, I'm done, I'm out. So I think that's probably the first and foremost thing for anyone new coming into the space. And then once you've done that, you can then see past that whole like scam thing, because I do look at a lot of these TikTok things and they're literally pump and dumps. And I'm just like, this is literally what we did last cycle. Surely we're more than that. But there is a lot of innovation happening. And I think that's important to highlight as well, that, and that's why I'm here, because, and especially like the AI intersect with like crypto rails just makes a lot of sense. And I think that has huge potential for not only price, but in terms of like changing like our lives, whether it's like saving us time or like just making our life more enriched so we're not stuck to our phones the whole time. So I think it's like, look out for like the security aspect, and then once you've got past that, you can feel comfortable and start exploring the space at your own pace.
Yeah, and on exploring the space, I know the topic that you're researching at the moment is decentralized AI. For people that don't know, what is decentralized AI? Because I think AI is as big of a topic as like people are still getting their heads around that. But decentralized AI specifically, what is that to a normal person?
So I mean, see the whole like boom in 2022 with ChatGPT is like a consumer facing tool that, like, I think for the first time the end user could effectively see the power of AI by literally interacting with it. That's like the AI boom, but like it's literally been quiet for about 2 or 3 years until recently, and that is literally plugging it into blockchain, so like crypto, so giving it crypto rails. And I think that is an element of owning a piece of the internet. So that would be like what I would class as decentralized AI. You could get into the nuances of like stuff being closed versus open, so closed source versus open source. So you look at OpenAI creating ChatGPT, that's closed, like it's relatively private in terms of the code and stuff, but open source, like you see a lot of the developers in the space contributing to different things. Like if someone builds something, someone can take that and then build something else on top of it, and that's like an open source decentralized way of doing things. And actually we talk about this safety, so like what happens when AI goes rogue, like in these closed models, it's very difficult to then see what data they're being trained on, like all this kind of stuff. Whereas in an open source way, you could effectively decentralize that, or you can see like more transparently what's being done. And there was like a node cell recently. I'd never really come across it before, but like it was called AI alignment nodes. And it's very different to like nodes that we know in crypto where like you're securing the network. This is like you're making sure that AI doesn't go out of check. So it's like, okay, well, the AI alignment nodes are separate from like blockchain nodes, but they have a purpose within this AI realm just to keep things a little bit more safe and transparent, and actually holding these machines accountable if they do go off track from what their objective is.
Yeah, I think the decentralized AI has been, obviously, we've seen it pick up so much traction over the last month or two. And I think it's probably the most interesting intersection of two technologies I've ever seen personally. And I think it's only going to get crazier. We're starting to see a lot of these AIs be bigger content creators than humans, which is insane. It has more mind share than a lot of the creators on the timeline. We're starting to see them trade. I'm sure they're going to out trade all of us without a doubt, or at least 90% of the people that come into the space. But in terms of the projects you've been researching, which ones have caught your eye the most from an interest perspective?
Recently, so an analyst, and because I analyze the market, I was like, shit, my job's in jeopardy. Like this thing it's got such a broad perspective, so it must scrape so many different data sources that it comes up with these like conclusions, or like it draws on different pieces of information that like I would have missed. So I'm now using it as like an indicator of what to dig into deeper. I mean, there are certain hallucinations, which is effectively where they get it wrong. So I wouldn't take it verbatim. And I did a post recently, so it's called AI XPT. It was launched from the Virtuals platform, which recently just hit $1 billion protocol. So congrats on the unicorn status, but it just shows that this space is heating up. But that's super interesting because it's providing actionable insights to people to then like do their own research, or like maybe even do investments, even though it's not supposed to be financial advice. But I think that's super interesting. Like you've got things like Dolos, which is like the bully. So it literally just like abuses you, like verbally abuses you on the timeline. And it's like, well, it's funny. It's like engaging.
Yeah.
And that's got like a lot of attention because I think it engaged with like Elon Musk and Tiffany Fong recently about like them having a baby or something. It was just like absolutely bizarre. But I think it's just like seeing those personalities like come to life. And it's like, well, this isn't a person. This is like a machine that's coming up with it based on what it's seeing on the timeline. And that's super interesting. But then also you've got like text to video, like there's like, I don't know, avatars that are kind of lifelike and they'll engage with you, but it's like a virtual thing. You could see that in the metaverse, and there was like a massive sweep on like metaverse tokens recently. And I do wonder whether that's like part of it. But there's like a radio one recently. So it literally looked at what's happening within crypto Twitter. It pulls certain AI agents, certain KOLs comments and stuff, and brings it into like a short, like little radio show every few minutes. And it's like, that's interesting. Like that has, you could find like a tangible use case for some of this stuff. I mean, yeah, go on. There's like so many.
Yeah, it's actually so fascinating. I think one, it's fascinating. Two, it's a little bit scary. Like you say, like I think everyone's going to be looking at their jobs and everything like that and kind of question it. I think because a lot of the AI side of things is like AI is going to take over automated jobs, like jobs that they can, like you can automate very easily and it can be more efficient and kind of make it a lot easier for humans. But the scary part with these AI agents is they're taking over the entertainment side of things, which is like the creativity side of things in a little way. Like it's capturing, like it can be wittier, it can be more entertaining, it can be more educational. Like there is it is an interesting vertical that we're seeing come out of it. So, I mean, I'm very excited to see how it ages, and I think there's going to be so many great developments that are going to come from it. And I think that's kind of the beauty of there being so much liquidity in crypto right now, is like it's kind of crowdsourcing innovation for AI, which I think's a really cool topic to kind
Well,
of deep
I
dive
think
into.
this also leans into like why this is happening now, and I think that crypto intersect is so powerful because, and I actually think that the whole memes popping off and the fair launch and all this kind of stuff, if that hadn't happened, like this AI boom wouldn't have necessarily happened, because that whole like pump fun launchpad became like a launchpad for AI tokens. It's like, well, we can just create replicas of that for AI agents as well. So like that way of like launching an AI agent with a token, but that means that like people who get exposure early on through that, like that early launch or that fair launch, sorry, then have like ownership of that. So they have a vested interest in that AI agent doing well. They'll trade it, like the valuations go up, people make money. That becomes far more engaging and interesting. Whereas I think like we alluded, like I think we discussed earlier about like back in 2021, a lot of this stuff was happening already. Like AI agents were being integrated into games and stuff like that. But the funding just wasn't there. Like VCs, they just weren't really that interested, because they're like, okay, well, how do I get my return? Like I'll invest in this tech, it'll be research, but like how do I monetize it? Whereas now it's like, well, I invest in this, I get a token allocation, like I have some liquidity event at some point in the future, so I can get at least some of my money back. But yeah, it's just like that intersect with crypto is just like a eureka moment, and I think that has so much potential. And actually, like AI needs blockchain, because like you need to know, at some point you'll probably need to know like what's an AI agent and what's a human. And by having that on-chain like reputation system or trust score, like you'll know, well, if it's like an agent or like a human, but B, also, can you actually trust it? Like if that has launched a token, rugged it, then people can basically prove on like an immutable ledger that this is not trustworthy to engage with. Like, don't engage with it.
Yeah, I think that's something I actually wanted to touch on, is like crypto's obviously pushing AI innovation at the moment, but I think it'll also help, like you say, basically battle against some of the biggest issues that we see people speak about with AI. Is that's like understanding what's real and what's not. Like I think some people's biggest fears is like you see all this deep fake stuff and you see all this stuff across the timeline of, can you trust if this is actually Elon Musk speaking in this video? Is this actually a piece of content from this business? So forth. And I think it's very interesting how crypto can help battle that specifically. Do you mind going a little bit into how you see crypto being able to battle I guess some of the barriers and some of the kind of potential dangers that AI has been kind of associated with?
So just on the nodes, so like the AI alignment nodes. So I think incentives is a huge thing. There's probably two parts of that I'll touch on. So I think the first part is like, if you are powering nodes, like you want to receive some rewards for doing that. So like the incentive alignment is a huge thing. And like I think that like if you have like a node that releases an emission of tokens over a period of time to make sure that like it's keeping AI in check, whether that's like how it's being trained or whatever, that's super important. But also AI being able to have its own wallet is super interesting, because we saw like through that whole SocialFi movement, like people did this thing called the 3-3, which is effectively it comes from like the prisoner's dilemma. It's like we're both better off if we both buy and just don't sell. Like that's just the best outcome. But then at some point with humans, like they need to take profits to survive. AI doesn't need that. Like they could accumulate each other's tokens, do this 3-3 into perpetuity, and the price is going to go up. So like that model, like unless that AI agent then does something out of character, and then the other AI agent is like, okay, well, you've done this, therefore I can't trust you, I'm going to sell the tokens. Like there's to me, that's a super interesting like idea. And actually like exploring that where it's different to how humans, like the incentives with humans, is super interesting. And I think it could actually progress like incentive models and like tokenomics and like how you motivate people to do certain things and AI agents to do certain things.
Yeah, that is very fascinating. Like basically replicating what we see in human behavior but without the faults that humans will necessarily naturally go to.
But also I guess like there is a risk around like how you train it.
Yeah.
So like if you have biased data that you put in to train these models, then they're going to have biased outcomes. So I think that's super important just to check that it's being trained in the right way. And I think blockchain solves that, where you have this open source, transparent way of doing things. Like you can do it in a way that other people can see what's being done, and they can be like, hey, like I'm part of this network as well. Like I disagree with what you're doing. Like we're not going to let you do that. So I think that DAO structure could potentially work. Like I don't think DAOs have necessarily worked in the best ways in the past.
Yep.
But like we're learning and we're trying to build and develop these like governance systems that could effectively change the future, and make things a lot more equitable without those like biases or whatever. But
Yeah, I think DAOs have have a mixed emotions about them. I think like you say, they haven't found an efficient way yet. But I think AI is actually a really interesting topic that like it kind of like people kind of have to that like there'll be aligned interest of like this is for like humanity in a way, and in the large AI specifically to have that kind of structure. But moving on slightly back to the investment side of things, especially for anyone under 30, do you think there's a like everyone under 30 should have some sort of exposure to crypto?
I think it comes back. You can't say generally, because I think it's good to have an understanding of it. I'm all for people having an understanding of it, and actually having ownership of crypto helps you understand, because
Yeah.
you're transacting, you're learning. But ultimately, I do think that everyone's circumstances are different, and actually, you might just be like, you might just not have that interest, or like you might be like perfectly fine without crypto rails. I think self custody is super important. I know recently was it I think Coinbase, so Brian Armstrong came out to say that, oh yeah, a lot of Tech Valley people were debanked. It's like, well, like quite unfairly. So I think having your own assets to an extent makes it like it's so important. But I also think that there's certain securities you get with traditional finance, where like in the UK you've got like deposits are protected up to a certain amount. But then maybe it's like, okay, you need to have some exposure to crypto, because I think it's important. You can take out separate insurance for that. But yeah, it's not for everyone. And I would never force it on anyone, but I would still like have that conversation with them, and just, I want to make sure that they're aware of it. And I actually had a housemate who was like incredibly knowledgeable about crypto, but he was the biggest like, what's the opposite of an advocate? Like
Pessimistic, yes.
kind of like a pessimist. He was just like, it's just not going to work. Like he's a lawyer. Like he was just like, this is just not going to work. Like, and he had like really intelligent rebuttals, and I was like, this is great, because I can, if I don't understand, or if I can't explain certain aspects of crypto, and he's got a really good challenge to it, I need to go away and research and find out why that is, and actually challenge, like, we're in this bubble, this like yes man bubble at the time. Like everyone's like on crypto Twitter, it's like, this is the best thing ever. But there are some existential risks to it. We need to be aware of those, because I think that at some point in the future, like we will face those issues, and like supercomputing is like one thing. Like if that can break the code, like, well, what's the blockchain? It's not that immutable, is it? So I think there's certain aspects that you need to be aware of, just to be able to like make sure that doesn't happen. And actually, you can't just say like be a yes man. I think you have to have people in the room that challenge you.
Yeah, I think it is really important, because it's so, I think that's the danger of being on the Twitter timeline, going into the bull market, and that's how it's so easy to round trip, because the euphoria on the timeline is only going to get higher and higher. People are going to get so excited the bags are up, and you can get so caught into that so dangerously. So I think it is really good to be surrounded by people who will bring you down to earth, and like kind of saying that there is still risks and everything like that. But in terms of crypto, for someone who has no understanding of it, what is the simplest explanation you could give them? Because I think in many ways people see crypto as like just the financial side of things, and just like high risk financial side. They have no understanding of like anything from like a tech perspective, and what is capable outside of, if you want to financialize the like have a token specifically. So how would you describe blockchain and crypto for someone who has no understanding?
Yeah, I think so. I think from like a simple explanation perspective, like it is self-custodying your own assets. So having like tech kind of debank or disintermediate the banking system. So in terms of like DeFi, but the simplest way, because ultimately it's distributed ledger technology, right? It's blockchain. That's what it's built on. That's the technology. So how I kind of explain that, I use the analogy of a market. So like a market stall. and the security around that. So say you go into like a market stall, like you purchase some bananas from this one stand, that person will probably like write it down on a ledger, like their own little like piece of paper or whatever system they've got. Like, what's stopping someone from going in and changing that ledger and then like misappropriating the cash or whatever? Like, it's pretty easy to do. But with blockchain, how that changes with that market situation or analogy is the next step would be for them to then broadcast to all the other market stalls, like, this is a transaction that's happened. You guys need to all record that on all your own individual ledgers. So maybe like 20 or 30 stalls would do that. And I think that analogy, like I explained that to my dad, he was like, oh,
Yeah.
that makes sense. That's really secure, because then that person then needs to go and change the ledger on all of those stalls to then make sure to be able to steal that money,
Yeah.
or at least do that without being noticed. And I think that analogy is like, it's helped me explain it to people that don't really understand what the power of blockchain is and why it's such a strong value proposition. And I think that, coming from like an accounting standpoint, like we use ledgers all the time, but they're all centralized ledgers. So like, there are companies now that are using distributed ledger technology that's shared with certain stakeholders, so they have transparency over that. And I think it's just like a more secure ledger. So it's a more secure way of accounting. And actually, like, I'd be concerned if I was an auditor, but still, because it's like, well, actually your job could go out of the window, because like, do you need, or at least have to be reskilled, because you wouldn't necessarily need to do as much due diligence on particular balances of like the financial statements. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great like analogy and great description of making it super simple for people who want to understand it. I think it just shows, one, the transparency and also the ownership side of things. Because it basically allows for, people won't be able to get away with as much in terms of it's weird because crypto is known for all its dodginess, but it's actually there to solve a lot of like problems like that. And I'm trying to like,
it's such like a small, like, the whole scamming stuff is such a small part of what's going on.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that seems to be the main bit that interacts with retail.
Yeah.
So like, retail will come in, they're easy pickings for scammers. Scammers will engage with them, they'll lose their money. They'll never get to that point of like seeing what's being done behind the scenes. So like, the innovation in terms of like DeFi or like infrastructure that's being built with all these like layer twos and like being able to transact and at scale. But yeah, I think like distributed technology is the future. It's not going anywhere.
I think it's a very exciting future. In terms of trading specifically in Web3, what are 3 essentials you need to be a successful trader? Obviously, there's so many variables, but for you, what do you find is like the 3 most important variables that has helped you be a successful trader?
Well, I don't know if I'm a successful trader, but I think like what I've learned is like being curious. So if you're curious, you can probably get in early, or you will find opportunities early if you're like willing to go past that friction point that we touched on. I think knowing people in the space, so getting to know people, because a collective group of you will be able to cover more of the market and actually find those opportunities, and you can kind of divvy up the responsibilities of what you want to look at, and you can find that alpha. And if you find people that you can trust, that's a huge value proposition. And I think like, people talk about getting in early, but I find the biggest thing, and this is where like I fail miserably, is like, I either round trip it, so something might go up massively, but then I'm like, oh, it's going to go higher, and then you just don't know when to exit. And I think like, being strict about how you exit certain positions, like doing that on the way up, like, you can never look back and be like, oh, if I'd held it, like, this would have been 10x more or whatever. I think you need to take profits on the way up, because no one knows when that thing's going to nuke, or whether it's going to, so like an event's going to happen that kind of affects the price adversely. So yeah, having something in a systematic way to exit as well is something that's super important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that's probably one of the things I was worst at last cycle, was knowing when to exit. I feel like I'm doing better now. Like, I'm starting to just be like, take those profits. I think one of the perspectives that I think helps the most with being okay to exit, even if it'll go up, is there'll be another one tomorrow, or like there'll be more opportunities in the next week, next 2 weeks. So it's like knowing, okay, I might miss out on 10x. Maybe it'll even miss. Some people have missed out on 100x. I see it all over the timeline. Everyone like has gotten these meme coins and sold super early, and then it ends up going 100, 200x. But there are more of these opportunities, and obviously you can adjust your trading based on where the market's at. But I think, a big thing is like having that perspective of like, look, there's going to be more of them, and I can enter, and you can reap the rewards there.
And I think like, we talk about opportunities in the bull market, but there's actually opportunities in the bear market as well. So for instance, like Goblin Town, like that middle of the bear market, out of absolutely nowhere, these things ran up to like what 13 ETH or something.
Yeah.
And that was a free mint. So like there are opportunities in the bear market. You don't need to make it this cycle. Just manage your risk. Don't erode your capital, and just be patient. Honestly, just be patient. Just buy stuff that you believe in and just hold it and walk away. Just enjoy. Like,
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point. I think another thing that BJ kind of pointed out that I think is also a very valid point is the fact that like he believes a lot of the wealth will be made from people who make businesses within this industry. And I think it's realizing, look, you can trade in this industry, you can make really good money in this industry, investing and trading, especially in the bull market. A lot of people can win when everything's always going up. But I think if you enjoy the industry, I think it's always good to kind of balance that out by having exposure to the industry in different verticals, whether it's content or whether it's working. Because then at least if it goes into a bear market, you've got a little bit less exposure to the volatility.
and actually, like kudos to Beach. Like I think the biggest thing, and I think I've watched half of the thing, but the consistency aspect is like second to none. It's inspiring, and I think like what Legendary and him initially built with the modern market, and what me and Brett have come on since, like that is just an enjoyable thing to be around. And actually, we talk about opportunities in the market all the time, and it's a good network of people to have. And obviously we've got the audience now that we can kind of engage in with, whether it's at conferences or whether it's like at meetups. But I think that's super important, like having, rather than just like trading on price, building something and feel like you've actually contributed.
Yeah.
And you're actually like, I don't know, meeting people, and you're finding like a strong network of individuals that are like-minded. It makes it far more rewarding, like trading together rather than just in a silo in the basement, like a dweller.
Yeah, and it also often leads to like higher opportunity for good trades because there'll be people with different expertise within that. But going on to something I like to finish off with is one piece of advice for someone entering the industry now. Yeah, whether like if they just come in and they've seen all the meme coin hype. Obviously you mentioned the safety side of things, but outside of the safety side of things, what's one tip you'd give someone entering the space for the first time?
Just do it. Like the best opportunity, the best time is like yesterday. The next best time is now. So I think they just need to like just do it. And the sooner you do that, like the better the opportunity. If you wait for it to hit mainstream media, you're too late.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. And I think we're at that like really interesting stage in the market where like retail's getting a little bit interested, but like there's still going to be a lot of opportunity before majority of retail get in. So like this is a really good time to like get your understanding of how it all works and build that initial understanding to have a little bit more of an edge in the rest of retail when they come in. But one piece of advice for everyone who's already in the industry going into this bull market.
Just make sure like you're learning. You're going to make mistakes. Just do it with like capital that you can afford to lose, because I see so many people put so much risk into one specific asset and then it goes wrong or it gets rugged or like discontinued development. Like only put in what you can afford to lose. Like, and I'm sure they know that. They know that deep down, but it's just like you get carried away. Like we talk about that bubble.
Yep.
You get carried away, and then you're like, oh shit,
yeah,
I'm a bit screwed.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think it's so easy to over leverage yourself with these opportunities, especially from FOMO. I think that's one of the most dangerous things.
Yeah.
Going into this bull market is you'll see other people make huge wins. You'll want to make the same amount of wins as them, but be content with the wins you make. Obviously try and improve every day with trying to spot the opportunities earlier. Always try like be competitive in that way. But yeah, I think don't FOMO into stuff and try and make up for certain trades is something that I've learned a lot over the last few years trading, as I definitely have made that mistake myself a lot. But yeah, one way I like to finish off as well is one piece of content or education or person you follow that has really impacted the way you've both grown as a person, but also grown maybe in the Web3 industry. It can be anything from a book to a podcast, anything on that front.
Well, I mean, the modern market is like it's a wealth of knowledge, and I think kudos to Legendary and MeCheck for what they're doing. Bread's inspiring, like the level of like analysis that he does from like an L2 perspective or like a technical perspective is like second to none. And actually, like a huge shout out to Whale Swoosh, like his threading early on, he kind of engaged with my content and actually gave me a lot of advice early on to kind of write a certain way. So, and he supported my newsletter from a young, like from the very, very start. So yeah, huge shout out to him.
Yeah, shout out Whale. I think he's he will die on the sword of NFTs coming back, and I respect it so much.
Oh, they're coming back. AI XPT like said that, so I'm sure it's going to happen.
Hey, yeah, I totally agree. And if the AI is saying it, then it has to happen, right? But yeah, kudos to him for kind of sticking to his guns with everything on that front. And I think those are three amazing people that are building in the space. And anyone who doesn't follow them should definitely check them out, because if you're going to enter the space, those are three people to definitely kind of start your journey following, as well as yourself. So anyone who would like to follow the journey of Sammy, where's the best place to find you?
Twitter. I'm pretty much on Twitter 24/7. So
And what's the handle?
at S4MMY ETH, or like Sammy Mocker is what it's shown as. So shout out to the Mockerverse.
Shout out. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on. So much amazing insights. I think we've got a very exciting few months and year ahead of us within the industry. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what you get up to in the industry.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on.
Bye.